What's going on, guys? It's John DeYoung here, and welcome to my three-part series on how to find either an A-grade market, an A-grade area, or an A-grade property. Today, I'm going to be focusing on an A-grade market and how to identify either a buyer or a seller's market. There's a well-known saying that's thrown around in the property investing game, and it's by none other than one of the best investors of all time, Warren Buffett, where he says, "Be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful." This statement is so simple, and so many people have tried to interpret it in different ways. One way to think about it is to not just be a sheep, following other people's tactics and strategies. If you follow what everyone else is doing, you're just going to have the same results as them. Ultimately though, this statement relates to price and value, which should never be confused as being the same thing. The price of something is what someone's willing to pay for it, and the value is what you actually get. When others are greedy, FOMO starts to kick in, and we see the price rise above value. This is where buyers are typically overpaying for an asset that holds less of a value. When others are fearful, we just want to get rid of the asset, so we start to see the price drop below value because they're just trying to sell it off. These two emotional reactions at each end of the spectrum are mostly driven by our social groups, news headlines, and media coverage that are all reporting on the most extreme worst case scenarios so that they can get the most attention. This results in that worst case scenario now being the predicted future, and that sheep mentality starts to kick in, where if we don't react right now, we could find ourselves in the worst situation in the future. I've rode the data science hype train over the last 5 years and come to the realization that predicting the future is almost impossible. All we really do is feed an algorithm with a ton of historical data and presume that the same trends in the future is going to cause the same results. The truth is that when it comes to the Australian property market, there are so many sub-markets, economic activities, government policies, financial regulations, and human emotions that all significantly impact the price of a property. Throughout this video, I'll be going over examples and scenarios that affected the market in the 2017 to 2019 slump. If you like this content, make sure you smash that like button as it seriously helps out with the YouTube algorithm. One way to mitigate most of these impacts is to hold an asset for at least a 10-year period. This way, you're not riding the waves of the cycle, you're just sitting there patiently waiting for the capital growth to compound over time. Although there is a sweet spot between the peak and bottom of a market that could be considered a safe zone to buy or sell a property. For property investors, it's more important to focus on the buy zone, as this is really where you make your money. Preferably, I would never want to sell a property as the cost to trade is around 8% of its value. I would only want to sell it if it's something that we call a lemon, where it hasn't performed as expected and is costing us more in opportunity cost than its actual value. Trying to sell at the very peak of the market can be pretty risky, and if a seller comes in way too hot, they could overshoot the peak and they're going to have to land somewhere on the decline of the declining market. Buying at the bottom of the market isn't great either. Sellers are scared and only the very desperate are selling their properties. Stock levels dry up and it's really hard to get a good quality asset for a very low price. Property analysts have tried to tackle this sub-market cycle problem with something called the property clock. I'll go over the HTW's October 2019 National Property Clock as an example. As you can see, at 12 o'clock we have the peak of the market, followed by a declining market at 3 o'clock, the bottom of the market at 6 o'clock, and a rising market at 9 o'clock. Different markets are then scattered around the property clock to indicate their current cycle position. This is a much better way than looking at it as the whole Australian property market as the media covers it, because all of these markets should be looked at individually. Again, it's always better to go as granular as possible here, even down to the suburb or street market level. Bigger markets like Melbourne and Sydney cover many smaller little pockets that are all in their own individual cycles. Let's go over some market conditions that are suitable to either buy or sell a property. These will just be my interpretations and understandings and should never be considered as personal financial advice. The safe zone to buy is when consumer confidence is recovering. If we look back again at the property clock, this would be at the start of recovery phase. At this point, sellers are more confident to list their properties, and we should see some better quality assets come back onto the market. This position may make you feel like you've missed out on that very bottom of the market, and prices might have significantly increased in just a short amount of time. However, picking that very bottom of the market is almost impossible, and the price increase will be long forgotten after 10 years of good compounding growth. The safe zone to sell in a market is when it's experienced a period of strong growth, of at least 10% per annum for more than 2 consecutive years. After every strong growth period, there should be a price correction. On the clock, this phase can be identified as approaching peak of the market. Again, it's almost impossible to pick that absolute peak of the market, and you may feel a little bit reluctant to sell in this phase because it might feel like you're going to miss out on future growth. Although, as discussed before, if I was selling a property, it would only be because it's a lemon. And if I had the opportunity to lock in a profit or at least just break even, at least I could sell that asset and free up my borrowing capacity, and I wouldn't have to worry about the opportunity cost of holding that property. Economic activity also plays around with our markets. Some of the bigger indicators to watch out for is population growth, income, and unemployment. Sometimes even other economies that are being reported in the media in a negative connotation diminishes our view on the global economy, and it reduces consumer confidence. Population growth impacts the market because everyone needs a place to live. With consistent population growth, there's an ongoing demand for supply, and there's only a limited amount of land near our CBDs. Ultimately, this increases the value of our land. When looking at a specific market, I would look for consistent population growth that's growing at a faster rate than the region overall. I would check population forecasts, and any market with a low forecast for population I would avoid. People won't buy when they're insecure about their jobs. With an increase in under and unemployment, consumer confidence goes out the window, and the big ticket items such as buying a house are the first expenses to be put to the side. Increasing incomes allows people to raise their borrowing capacities, giving them access to more expensive houses or to just have more money in the kitty for auction day. This often results in higher housing prices as our emotional reactions cause us to spend that additional money in the kitty and overpay for a property. Government policies also toil with consumer confidence. We've seen a great example of this in the 2019 election, where the Labor government was proposing to make changes to the capital gains tax and negative gearing policies. These two policy changes halted property investors' engagement in the market, because some of the changes would have completely altered the properties they invested in. I wouldn't be surprised if these two policy changes was the main reason that the Labor government lost the election. I want to know what other indicators you guys look out for when it's the right time to buy or sell in a property market. Leave them down in the comment section below. Some of the biggest impacts on market cycles is financial regulations. There's another saying thrown around in property investing that investing in property is more of a financial game rather than a property game. Since 2014, APRA has required that all lenders assess loans on either the greater of a 7% assessment rate or a 2% buffer on top of the actual loan rate. On the 21st of May 2019, APRA removed this requirement as they believed it is no longer required. This allows lenders to assess a loan on a lower assessment rate, reducing the serviceability requirements for buyers, and ultimately increasing their borrowing capacities. From June to October 2019, we've seen 3 cash rate cuts of 0.25 basis points each. These cash rate cuts are then passed on to the banks, which means we're paying less interest on our home loans. But it also means that we're earning less interest from having money in a savings account. This encourages the population to spend more money, rather than just sit it in their savings account. It also stimulates the population to go and borrow more money at that lower interest rate and spend it on bigger ticket items such as cars and property. Although throughout this video I've provided examples that may have impacted the market between 2017 and 2019, these scenarios individually may not impact the market in the future. In saying that though, I'll summarise this all together with a comment made by the CBA economist Christina Clifton to the Australian Financial Review. The coalition election win, the Reserve Bank cash rate cuts, and APRA's changes to serviceability metrics have seen the housing market turn around. We expect moderate dwelling price gains over the second half of 2019 and 2020. Sometimes just one market driver isn't enough to have a significant impact, although in combination they can all completely change the current market conditions by distilling confidence back into investors and encouraging the population to spend more money. As always, seek your own financial, legal and property buying advice. These videos are just my opinion and should never be considered as personal advice. If you're keen for more content, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you don't miss a video. And until next time, happy house hunting.